bringing it all together. Hopefully, what good tutors do. Hopefully, you have maybe jumped in and been in some other courses some other workshops over the last couple of days. We're going to be recording this session so that we can share it with you later if you missed it or missed bits. Right. I'll just move on from. Okay, I'd also just like to make an acknowledgement of country. The University of Queensland acknowledges the traditional owners and the custodianship on the lands on which we're meeting today. We pay our respects to their ancestors and descendants who continue connection with country. We recognise the valuable contributions to Australian and global society. I'd also like to comment that I guess I'm standing in the St. Lucia campus today, so it's pretty much always been a site of learning across the millennium. Hong, you have started recording, thanks very much. Okay, so we've got a group, quite a number of people in the room today to support you, and I'm just going to do some introductions. So my name's Karen Shepherd. I work in Italy, the Institute for Teaching and Learning Innovation. And I'm a learning designer. And I spend a lot of time working in professional learning. And I'll just pass you over to Peter Rutherford, my colleague, and he'll introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Peter Rutherford. I'm a learning designer as well. I work with Karen. And a lot of our work within Italy is to improve the quality of teaching and learning throughout the university. So hopefully between Karen and I and the other hosts, we'll be able to answer some questions for you if you have any. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Peter. Alex.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm also a learning designer at Italy. But prior to that, I was tutoring anatomy with the School of Biomedical Sciences for about 4 years. And I've been able to take a lot of what I learned as a tutor there into my new role at Italy when I joined last year.
Thank you, Alex. And Jimmy.
Good afternoon and good day. So I'm Jimmy and I've been teaching here at UQ for the past 4 years. So I've been a tutor and course facilitator in the business faculty. So my areas of focus are predominantly undergraduate and MBA teaching.
Nice. And Hung is also supporting us, and she's from the e-learning team. And she'll be actually talking to you a little bit later about the kinds of resources and the kinds of support that you can access through the e-learning team. I'm not going to go terribly far down this pathway because I want this to be very much an interactive conversation rather than us talking at you and you just sitting back and kicking back in the background. So expect to be maybe I'll be turning this PowerPoint off in a little while. So we're kind of thinking about the kinds of the ideas we're looking at is the kind of tutor you are or that you would aspire to be, and thinking about how you might further develop your skills along the way. I've got this slide that I borrowed from a colleague, and he borrowed it from somewhere else. Obviously, he's borrowed it from EduCourse, but sometimes it works quite nicely because it gives you kind of a way of setting expectations, particularly if you're tutoring online. Perhaps not so much in the room, but I still think setting expectations is a great way to start as to how people are going to go on as well. So in this particular session, you can leave your cameras off, but we'd love you to put them on because I like to see friendly, smiling faces. Microphone, keep it muted as we go, but if you want to jump in and ask a question, please feel free to unmute and jump in. If you want to talk or if you would rather not interrupt the flow but want to be heard, then just put your hand up in your Zoom space and feel free to jump into chat. Peter and Hong will be looking at that and they'll kind of ask any questions if you want to ask any questions at that point. And then there's anything else related to the session. Okay, so hopefully some of you have jumped in and added any other extra questions in Padlet. a great active learning tool and works a treat online and both and in the room as well. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we start talking active learning. So to get this ball rolling, now a colleague told me this story yesterday, and it's a story to consider. So a new student, and this is like literally this week, it's the first week of the university, new student just arrived at UQ, noted that they had been in how many hours of learning sessions, including their orientation time, before they were asked to speak to the person next to them. So if you know where your annotate button is, jump in there. It should be up the top. And grab yourself a stamp, and I'm going to use a little star. I'm going to put my star under the first 15 minutes. No, I'm not going to, but I'm just demonstrating. So if you would like, you should be able to find your annotate button in your screen somewhere, hopefully. See if you can put your annotate button where you think this student was asked the first time they were asked to speak to the person next to them. You only get virtual chockies. Not like Jimmy, apparently, who hands out Hershey bars in his class.
Sorry, I'm Susan. I can't see the annotate button where I go to.
So if you go to the top of your screen, you should be able to. So when the bar comes up the top, you've got the chat bar, or down the bottom on the right-hand side.
Yeah, it's usually at the top, and there's a drop-down bar. And if you've got a traditional view with people at the top, a little pen.
Got you. Thank you.
Okay. Still waiting. You can put it, if you can't find the annotate button, you can just pop it in chat if you like, which after how much time. Okay, if this was a poll, I'd be closing it in 30 seconds. And thanks, Susan. And imagine the pounding music as we shut this one down. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Unfortunately, 15 minutes would be great, but no. Even 4 hours would be awesome, but no. 8 hours? Yeah. After 14 hours, this person had been asked to talk to the person next to them. And that's including the time that they were in orientation. So nobody wins the chocolates, even though they're virtual. So my point there, I guess, is that if we as tutors are the first point of call, then what makes a wonderful tutorial is probably engagement with each other. And we're going to unpack that further with Jimmy, Alex, and Peter. But yes, after 14 hours, it's kind of a bit of a frightening thought. So let me, oops, I've just got to get rid of, stop starring my thing, and clear, clear. Nope, clear. Drawings. Okay. Except I'm still doing stars. Okay. So my point is contact before content, which somebody gave me yesterday, so as well. So you learn, one was learning all the time. So thinking about that as we're talking to James and Alexa around what makes awesome tutorials. So I want to kind of break this up around. Thanks, Aisha. I'll clear that one out for you. What makes a great tutorial? And we're kind of going to maybe break it into thinking about the preparation, beginning, the middle, and the end, and then going on to the next time. So I wanted to kind of think about the questions that people had asked in the Padlet, but I've got some base ones here that I'd like to get kind of talk to Alex and James. So, so my first question is, in terms of that, what do you see as like the key characteristics of a good tutorial? Okay, given that kind of concept of that prep, beginning, middle, and end, and then what happens the next time. Maybe I'll start with you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Karen. I was going to say a good and successful tutorial really starts really the weekend before class actually begins. So this is where you go through and you look at your content, especially if you're a new tutor. This may take some time. If you're a returning tutor, usually doesn't take too long at all. You just eyeball it. But the big thing, the really critical thing you need to do is get yourself across the board with the assessment, because this is the one area that the students really trust you to get right, and they'll build trust with you if you can do that. You can also look at areas where you can provide anecdotal examples in the slides as well. Just make little mental notes of areas where you can extend upon the knowledge potentially. And once you get a bit of mileage, you can sort of see, okay, here's an aspect that potentially students might ask some questions about, or this is something that they might find a bit vague. At the start of the class, we have a dedicated playlist actually in the business school that we play before our classes. It's on Spotify. We just put it up on the lecterns and it plays around the room. And that provides a good atmosphere, an engaging atmosphere as students walk in. Typically, they get a bit of a, this seems a bit different. Something's going on here. And they're all business themes. So we got like bands like Client Liaison and all sorts of things in it as well. So it's pretty interesting. And we kicked that off, and you will find pretty quickly that the students really reflect the level of energy and also the emotion you put into the room. So you really need to start with a, good morning, good afternoon, how are you all doing today? Thrilled to have you all in the class. Really bring that sort of energy in there. For the middle, which I could say is probably for us going to be things like Padlet exercises. This is where you go around, don't stay behind the lectern, really go around and ask students to describe and really give their input as to what they did. Don't rubbish their answers, just say, oh, yeah, it's pretty good. But, in a grad role, we'd probably do something like this. So that's something we mentioned there. The end, always allow about 5 or 10 minutes or so. This is not just for, getting to your next, running across campus if need be, but typically students, particularly the switched on ones, will come up and ask you questions. Especially during assessment times, they might show you something like, is this the right thing to do? And you might see, oh, I can't quite edit that, I'm not allowed to, but I can provide some pointers based on what I see here. So that ending can be pretty critical as well. Never go overtime. That annoys the other tutors as well. But yeah, try not to give them too much of an early mark, make sure all the content's there. So that's my sort of overview for the characteristics of getting a good tutorial up and running.
So that tells me that that's very much around that organization and trust.
Yeah, very much. So I find that if students understand that you're going to give them good content, I find in business, especially to do with, hey, this is actually what I'm going to be doing in an internship or in a role or something like that, that's when suddenly the hands start going up en masse around the room. Also, if you can rapid fire their question and be able to give, be able to give some nuanced feedback, and that really comes down to knowing your course content. So really it is the preparation is, I would say, is the be all end all, but that has all sorts of positive flow-on effects as well, like trust, being able to carry on the class. If you get a real curveball question, are you going to fumble it? Or is the student actually going to go, hey, this one actually really knows what they're talking about. They actually know what I'm going to have to do in interviews and the grad jobs. I'm going to come back next week to learn more. So it all has positive flow-on effects from there.
Okay, nice. Thanks, Jimmy. Alex, you were in a bit of a different context when you were tutoring. So how did you kind of in that space? It was more about in the moment almost, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, Karen. So in my context, I was tutoring in human anatomy in the lab-based setting, and sometimes it was online. And so I would be interacting with students one-on-one or in small groups, talking around a single table, and the conversation was very like on the fly. So the students would come to me with questions, or I would ask them questions. And so there was less of a lesson plan that I could follow. So my preparation was more about how can I anticipate what students' questions will be at each individual station, which had set models and set content to work through. What are the key points that I could go through with them, and then how can I kind of challenge their knowledge through that? So going back to that idea that organization is really key, I found it very beneficial when I started doing that. I wish I had known that when I started, to prepare more and to prepare those conversations. So having very clear goals in mind and clear questions that I could ask students, and how to manage that discussion with them and stay on topic to manage the learning. And making it very clear that what we were doing was linked to their learning, so that they didn't feel like they were wasting their time while they were in the class. So linking that activity to the goals of the class and the overall course, something I did. And also agreeing with Jimmy on building trust. So I would be like facilitating this discussion with students, and also doing it in a way to build relationships with them and build rapport. And for different groups of students and different individual students, that would look like something different, which then came back to my planning. So I would reflect back on how a certain session went and what I could do differently, and how I can like build rapport with different types of students, and then engage with different types of students through that conversational setting.
Okay, so again, so building on that, so organization, preparation, resource. I'm going to leave people management for a little bit longer. You touched on time skills, but I'll talk about that one as well. And you might have talked a little bit about this, Jimmy, before, but one of the big questions, and certainly over the years, we've had a number of different sessions like this. And one of the key questions that always comes in is, how do I engage my students? Now, 3 years ago, this was always a problem or an issue, I guess, because we were often doing these kinds of things online. So engaging online when you know, like you can see 3 live or 4 live people and then a bunch of tiles and names can be complicated, and sometimes, let's go soul destroying. However, okay, if we go back to that original, how do we engage our students, and what does that look like? Jimmy, you talked a little bit about the music, but actually unpacking it, what does it actually mean on the ground?
So on the ground, and I just want to add the caveat that this wouldn't really be relevant in Alex's case, because, you know, this is running it in the lab. She has to go around for individual groups. So I just want to add the caveat that the advice I give is for seminar rooms predominantly, with multiple slides around the screens and people sitting on tables, even lecture theatres as well. So I found the most effective thing you can do, I find, and this is what I tell the tutors, it is a cardinal sin for you to stay chained to that lectern. Don't stay behind that lectern. Do not look into the computer. Get out, talk to multiple slides around the room, walk all around the room. And the reason for that is you're the focal point for learning. You're the source of that information of where everything's coming from. So if you're just going to speak in a monotone voice this whole time and just read straight off the slides and just going on like that, that's not at all engaging. There's nothing that's going to neurologically engage people about that. So if there's 3 screens around the room, you go walk about, you continually project your voice, you talk to all those different screens. And, you know, if students put up their hands in different places, you can do that. And the unexpected benefit of that, I would say, is if anyone's secretly on their phone, if they're looking up Bumble or Temu or something like that, they're something less likely to do that, because there's a bit of, you're keeping an eye on what they're doing. And on top of that, in marketing at least, that's when we can turn those students into a legit teaching and learning example, saying, let's just walk us through what you're doing there. This is relevant to what we've got here on the slides. So that's one of the things we do. And on that front, we also have these things that are called engagement grenades. And this is what you can put into your class content. So essentially, it's a fact that makes, and this is something you can pick up while doing your reviewing of the content, that makes you stop and actually go, whoa, okay, that's a bit interesting. Like, it might be something, if your biology might be something to do with caffeine. If it's in business, it's, probably something to do with actually dating apps or online shopping. It's something we don't do so much with the MBAs, because That's more actually trying to stop them from talking so much. But that's where you come up with a wild fact and you sort of say, what do you all think about that? Or something like that. So it's really like a really left ball sort of statistic, and you might want to leave a bit of silence afterwards, and you sort of see people go, wait, what? What did he just say? Or something like that. So that's something that we do as well. We had on the slides originally, and Karen also mentioned this before, bribery is a tactic. Like sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But what it actually is, it's goal-oriented cognition. So we do bring the Hershey bars sometimes, and this is especially for if you're running a Kahoot before the exam, the person who wins gets that chocolate. Or better yet, you see that there on the right. That's literally what we do. So it was quite interesting. A couple of years ago, we had a situation where students felt fairly unprepared for an exam with short response questions. They were there in the class content, they just hadn't really turned up to the class to do that. They're like, oh, I didn't really understand. The course content did it, they just weren't engaging with it. So what we did was we had the Padlet activity there that you can see on the screen, and the best response for that with the A and sort of B aspects of the short response questions, like outline the theory, then apply it, for instance, gets one of those chocolate bars. And you'll see in the feedback there, the really paradoxical thing we saw is people may not care about their exam grade. People may not even care about the chocolate. They just want to win it. So sometimes you do need to think outside the box a little bit when it comes to this sort of engagement. So just to recap there, get out from behind the lectern, really get amongst your students and engage them. Go walk about around the room by all means. Like if you're explaining stuff, do the minority, like report hands if you're illustrating how the components of a model feed into each other and work. Also, accentuate the more interesting sort of things in the course. And don't feel afraid to go to the lolly shop and potentially claim that back on tax. That's all I can say.
Thanks, Jimmy. So Alex, I'm guessing that in the labs there's probably not much chocolate, but there's a lot of incentive. How do you incentivize in your feedback, I suppose, is a good question in terms of that.
Yeah, there's no food allowed for health and safety reasons. And yeah, it's a bit more challenging because the course is very content heavy. Then a lot of students are really focused on how do I pass the exam and how do I memorize all these facts to be able to do that. And my focus is, well, we want to go beyond just memorizing facts. So I try to incentivize them by going like, yes, I'll help you memorize these facts, but I'm also going to challenge you to understand the content in a different way. But by kind of engaging with them at their level, so if they come up to me and say like, I just want to learn these facts, I'm like, okay, that's something that they want to do. I can use that as a starting point to, again, build that rapport with the student and then extend that into deeper thinking. That it is slow and students don't like to do it at the beginning, but when we can go through an example and they see the benefit of that in how it shortens their learning, then they start to come on board very, very slowly. So it's not necessarily something we can do. They won't necessarily be right on board from the get-go, but they do start to see the benefit as you kind of keep using that technique and communicating back to them why you're doing what you're doing. So instead of me just jumping into certain explanations or questions, I say to them like, this is to help understand like how to link anatomical structures to function and to then link into later in the semester, or to check your prior knowledge and linking it to what we're doing now. So I tell them that information and then go, oh, okay, they are less annoyed by it and are thinking this is going to help me pass my final exam. And then that kind of gets us into that conversation.
So what you're saying me that you actually, like you're structuring that feedback and you're structuring the conversation that so that it makes very clear connections to where they're going.
Yeah.
But you're also saying, what you're also saying to me is that you differentiate across the group.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Which
because
it must be quite difficult in an hour or 2 hours.
Yes, and then well, the whole class will be about 1.5 hours or 2 hours, but the conversations with students will be up to maybe 5 minutes before I move to talk to a different group. So I'll be floating around and have to manage that within a short period of time.
Okay, pick me.
And yes, so yeah, like you said, it is difficult to manage. It was something that took me a long time to learn and wrap my head around, but it was having a toolkit in place is what helped me going into the classes. So being aware of different ways to engage the students and different, I guess, different tools I could use in the moment, different levels of engagement, and how I can adapt depending on what the students were saying to me and what I observed from how they were kind of interacting with me. So as an example, and this goes back to, yes, what Jimmy was saying of get out from behind the lectern, is I relate to the student as a person first. So I don't just come in and start, you know, delivering a mini lecture. I'll say like hello, or like chat to them a little bit, or pick up on their conversation and then kind of join in. So relating to them as a person, so then they see you as a person, and then starting with a really low level or low stakes, I should say, priming question that's related to the content, so that they feel comfortable talking about the content and feeling safe to make mistakes in their answers, and then understand that it's a safe place to learn. And then from there, moving into more higher stakes engagement, but also offering different ways that the students can engage with me. So I'll ask a lot of questions and a lot of different types of questions, and the students can answer by, they can write down in their book and not share that with me. They can answer verbally in front of everybody, or they can just talk to me like quietly off to the side away from everybody else. Or sometimes I look over their notes and I see what they've written down, and I'll use that as an anonymous way to say, oh, like some students might say this, maybe no one's written anything, so I'll say, oh, in the past students have said XYZ, or bringing in ideas like this is often a concept that students are confused by, and then this is one way to understand it. So kind of bringing in different examples and options. If nobody wants to say anything, then I'll go back to them with like a multiple choice question of giving them options, and then they can pick one of those options. So if there's no engagement, then lowering the stakes of what that is. And then, yes, really kind of following the conversation from there. It's hard to describe it because it is so individual with every type of discussion that you have.
What I'm picking up there is that individual piece. And I think, Peter, you've unmuted, and I wondered if you wanted to bring into your conversation around things like how do you support students, that wide and varied spectrum of students that we might deal with.
Right, I was just going to jump in on something that Alex said, where she's talking about introducing different strategies. And I think that's an important part of your initial planning. So when you're preparing for class, work out what you want to do. You've got learning outcomes that you want to achieve for everybody, and you've got going to have information or content that has to be passed along, but also you want to have the students active and engaged and doing something for the majority of the time in which they're in the class. And that's when you might want to start thinking about what sort of strategies you want to use. And even if you don't feel confident, it's a good thing to do it right from the very word go. So just go for low stakes, pick a single activity and introduce that on the first day. Talk to the students about why you're doing it, because you might feel that students aren't going to be receptive to it. But if you explain why you're going to do it and why it's a good thing, they'll have a better understanding of why they're doing it and not disengage because of that. And then I think as your confidence in what you're doing increases, you'll be able to start introducing more activities as well, and a bigger variety. I think during that time that you've got them, as James said before, we don't want to have a mini lecture. What they need is interactive and engaging activity. If you can get them out of their seats to work on something, that's a great thing to do halfway through the session, just so there's a bit of movement, get them moving between different groups and not working just with their mate from before the lesson. so that there's more an open approach with all of the students being included in the class. Having said that, I think we have this big push to engaging our students. And thinking back to one of the questions that came up on the Padlet, my first thought when I saw it about students that aren't being engaged is I have a bit of a philosophy that you can do the best you can to engage more students for more of the time, but you don't want to beat yourself up if you can't engage all the students all the time. But taking the opportunity to get as many involved as you can, I think that's a really good, a really important role of being a tutor. Thank you, Karen. I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, and then there is a question. There is a question on the Padlet that says, and I'll actually read it. Unless who was it that put that?
Was it Beatrice?
Was it Beatrice? Is Beatrice?
That's the one I was addressing.
Yeah, because I think, is she there? No, Beatrice. Yeah, just no.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Hello, Beatrice.
Yeah.
How are you? But then it was a great question in terms of so you've said, do you want to kind of explain what you were talking about, or the circumstances where you asked that question, perhaps?
You mean the question I left on the Padlet?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's a kind of a dilemma I experienced both as international student coming over here for my master's study at the beginning, and now I'm on my PhD project, and also right now I'm doing the tutoring. I can feel it from both perspectives. And actually, I literally just got a student asking me this kind of questions. So as an international student, back in my cultural background, a teacher's role is more about like a facilitating student. But very traditionally, it's a little bit like a teacher-centered. And now we move on from this kind of banking method to the transformative. It's more about like a facilitating a student. However, in the Chinese style, there was a little bit of like being a strict master, being a strict like instructor, and then you just push your student and then you help them, which means at the beginning you should be strict. And here in Australia, I just realized, okay, one of the first things I learned, be sensitive, very sensitive to other people's feelings and all this, very sensitive at the level. I don't know what is the bound, what level. And I got a contradicting terms. One is pushing the boundaries of yourself. Okay, push boundaries, and then to live fully, and then to just get the maximum of yourself. And another saying is, you don't push other people's boundaries. You don't push people's boundaries. It made me really feel contradicting. It's pushing boundaries. Okay, push your own boundaries, and then at the same time don't push other boundaries. So that's where it got me very much perplexed and stuck. So of course, and here in Australia, I also English is a kind of a global language, and would like to adopt a little bit of a global perspective viewing these kind of things. So I would like to really consult your guys, your experienced tutors, how I can balance these two sides, and then provide really efficient as well as the welcomed kind of a service to the students to really help them to realize their potentials. Because some Chinese students especially, just saying, okay, well, it seems like the tutor doesn't do much kind of job, didn't really give me that much kind of didn't put my effort for me to give to allow me to get achievement, because they may expect from their background that the tutor may really just go out of their way to help them. They are a little bit dependent. So I would like to get a balance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, there you go. There's a challenge. Shimmy, do you want to have a go at that one? Because you talk about your different students in there.
Well, say hi, Anne. What you're experiencing may potentially be actually more of just a UQ thing, because at QUT, if someone doesn't do an assessment or something like that, it's not going to be lenient. They're just going to flat out tell them, sorry, you're not good enough for this industry. You need to take that in consideration. You need to fix yourself. Yeah, and to be honest, like, they're going to fail a job interview if they do that. So I can see the logic, but it's also very brutal. So it is a bit of a thing here at UQ. But you need to be, I think you would definitely be cautious first, because if you know, raise hell with students, you don't know which ones are in SDAs, which ones may have anxiety issues. So you just got to be a bit careful first in applying pressure. But that being said, if it's good to go around and give feedback to all the students, especially in your consultation sessions, making sure they're feeling engaged and whatnot. I would actually say if someone's not feeling properly engaged, I'm like, if this is easy for you, maybe a master's, maybe an honors degree is something you'd like to consider. Like, obviously you're pretty good at this. So providing that positive validation and reinforcement as well. But then again, you have to validate and reinforce something good. You can't just, praise everyone willy-nilly. You can't just, hand out chocolates everywhere. Because otherwise there's not going to be any positive practice or positive behaviors that are being perpetuated there. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And again, if you go to different universities, it's very much a different kind of attitude. There is a bit of a thing too that the UQ student, because they have like higher ATAR scores and stuff like that, they are more likely to be, and this is something I've noticed, they're more likely to be that anxious overachiever type. So yeah, generally around this part of town, at least, I would err on the side of caution when it comes to being really strict with your students.
Okay.
There are some exceptions to that, like if they are causing disruption in class, or they're doing, they're engaging, like say for example, they're giving you hell because you're not responding to their assessment query on an Easter Monday. That suddenly may become a bit of a HR issue. That's a completely different situation though. Yeah, positive reinforcement goes a long way.
Okay.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
you were talking earlier when we spoke before that you were talking one of the hot topics at the business school is around, or dealing with, well, a couple of things you talked about was that kind of idea of student misconduct, but also that around that group conflict as an issue, that were hot topics for new tutors or experienced tutors.
Is there anyone here? So for the tutors here from the business school, so a couple of recent developments have been, there has been a hotline set up to report student misconduct. That's something you should definitely go across the board with if you're new to tutoring. Also, there's also always the UQ Safe Zone app as well. So if someone says something that you're not particularly comfortable with and you see escalating, there is a big red button you can press. You just tell them where you're at and security will be on the way. But otherwise, some of the things we've seen lately is just students sort of pushing some boundaries and that sort of thing. I think a lot of it just comes down to people are in situations that they feel like they don't have control in. And sometimes applying pressure on the tutor is being seen as a way that they can they can feel in control of the situation. I want to preface that is completely unacceptable conduct from the student, and there are definitely ways to manage that. First of all, it can just, like, if a student's tucking a bit of a temper tantrum, that's clearly because during their upbringing, that's something that got them a good reaction from their parents. If they're doing something and you just say, that's all right, we'll just take care of that in a moment, we'll have a chat about that, no worries, we can talk about your concerns. Suddenly you sort of like, they just kind of freeze. I've noticed sometimes like it just doesn't compute in their head because that didn't get the reaction that they usually get. There was also another incident last year where there was a screaming match in one of my classes. A bunch of Chinese international students, I don't know, they had a history or something like that, got into a bit of a shouting match, and I made the mistake of just sitting down and going, oh, they're having a bit of a chat. Oh, well, you see that in the pub a bit. Whereas in reality, what you actually need to do in that situation is go up and say, we need to carry this outside. And then you can say, hey, you signed the student charter and you said you were going to be a member of the UQ community and that involved upholding certain values. Either I want to know, did you lie to me about that, or are you going to fix this? That's something, and usually that freezes them on the spot and they realize that, okay, it's not just breaking the rules, but they've let you down, they've let themselves down. That's usually a lot more powerful. And I would say for the classes as well, what you absolutely don't want to do is say to the whole class, I'm really disappointed with the level of conduct here. Because again, a lot of students who are trying hard, they just find that really demoralizing and, they disengage a bit. Just focus on those specific students that are being a bit of an issue and liaise that with your course coordinator. Don't let it spread to the rest of the class. So that's some of the things that we found last year, and there's currently an audit going on as well for the student conduct. But what we're seeing here is for the good old group conflicts process. You know, they're often very young students. They're still, you know, forming when it comes to social aspects. It is to be a little bit expected, but it can definitely be reduced and diminished and manageable. So what we have here is the official group conflict process that we use in the business school. Now, if you like, feel free to take your phone and take a picture of this process for usage in your own, you know, in your own teaching processes and methods. So this is a 4-stage process of escalation, and we show this slide to students at the start of each semester. It's always a complaint process, and the onus is on the students to report this to us. You know, we can't see what's going on inside their heads. They need to tell us what's going on. First of all, if you get a complaint from a student, you talk to that student, usually over email, or you direct them to one of your consultation session slots. This is where you start writing down, putting information on course record. And this is where if you might want to have a spreadsheet up and running of all your groups and your students, you might just put, you know, a little something next to the cells containing those students. Usually, if the student just has an event, that usually works quite a bit. Second step, that's where you go. You call in the students and say, hey, we've received an official complaint from a member of your group. You never identified a student that's done that, because that usually makes the situation worse. But just saying, I'm just following the UQ process here. This is something I have to do. Is there anything that you want to discuss? Because I've been hearing that, you know, this is not quite up to academic standards. Is there anything you'd like to share or discuss with me? Because we don't want to see this. We don't want to see this in the workforce. You're going to be a UQ student. We don't want people emailing back saying you're not competent enough for their career. Usually that helps out pretty well. And you're saying, I have full faith in you folks to really knock this one out of the park, and feel free to book more consultation sessions if you'd like me to assist you with that. And 80% of the cases, they stop there. Now, the third complaint is when you send out an emergency email, you flag it, and essentially it says formal misconduct notice, please respond in 72 hours. That's literally the subject line of that email. And you say a misconduct investigation has been launched by this course. Please submit all evidence of coursework done to date, especially if someone hasn't done that. And you check the metadata, you check all the stories for students. Usually you get about 4 different stories, and only one of those is the truth. Fourth complaint is where you talk to your course coordinator, and usually this is where one of the students gets their mark taken down because they haven't been cooperative. So yep, that's the process we have. It may be adapted for other schools, but yeah, that's what we do.
All right, Karen, you're just on mute.
Sorry, I just realised that. So thanks, Jimmy. Given that tutors are often in the first port of call, particularly around group work, because it's often a staged process. And I guess in some ways, Alex, you are also in charge of small group work, because your people often work in groups as well. So managing that conflict is might be a really important part of your task or your job. So the other questions that we've had over in the last little while, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that concept about being part of a tutoring team, and how do you manage? See, often we come in as tutors, and we might be it might be a 20 people tutorial team. So, and you'll have a course coordinator that will give you content or give you activities for each week. So some people have choice as to how they deliver it, and other people have no choice. So I guess my question is, how do you get the rewards if you have no choice, I suppose? And I guess, I mean, in a lot of ways, Alex, you were in the situation you were before. You really had, it was a certain thing you had to do. So my question is, how do you take the joy of teaching into a space where you may not have quite as much control over the content?
Yeah, I guess it's for me, it's starting to identify where those boundaries are and finding out where you do have a choice in what you're doing. So for me, there's no choice in what the content is or what the learning objectives are, or what material we will have in the classroom, but the choices in how I interact with the student. That's where I found there was actually a lot more options than I initially thought, in terms of making it match with the teaching team. It's having the conversations with the whole group of tutors to make sure we're delivering the same kind of content, but then also running with your own style. And part of that is experimentation as well. So I would try different things and see if they worked. And if they didn't, I would try to change. And if it did work, then I kept on going. Yeah, I think it comes back to that scene where you do have an opportunity to do to have a choice in how you're delivering the content.
Thank you. Peter, you made a comment. What were you?
I just drew your attention to a question that's been asked and seconded by another person.
Yeah.
What would James and Alex do when they've got students that consistently don't do their work before coming to class? So obviously it's an issue across the university. Maybe some strategies that you and you tutors could apply.
For me, in my context, because it is so individual, then if the student hasn't done any preparation before the class, then I am meeting them at their level and starting right at the beginning. So for example, the students have a set of practical notes that they can go through before they come into the lab and look at the different models that we have there. And quite often those students who wouldn't look at the content at all, or they hadn't been at the lectures. And so then I was in a position of starting to go through that content with them from a very basic level, but also being explicit with them and saying that there is a lot more here. And so I can't go through everything with you. And then for next time, try to come prepared, and then asking them if they do have strategies to be able to do that, and trying to help them build those strategies so that they can come more prepared next time. Because often there's something else going on that's preventing them from being able to come to class prepared, or being able to complete that work, whether it's access or they're short on time, or life happens. Yeah. What about you, Jimmy?
Thanks, Alex. I want to build on what Alex has said there as well about individual circumstances. Be empathetic, I would say, first and foremost. I know we've had a few ADHD students during our time, and they just can't really be focused unless they're in the classroom. They do some terrific work, and you're chugging coffee to keep up with their brain. So they're capable of doing it. It's just different modes of learning, I suppose. On the flip side, though, if, say, for example, you're in a computer lab teaching R, and a student comes in every single week half an hour late, you're about 20 slides in, they see the R code on the screen, they suddenly discover that they're religious, and they're putting up their hand, they're begging for help, that sort of thing. That's where you say, well, we're just through to class now. We do have consultations running after this. I highly encourage you grab a cup of coffee and come along to one of those, because we've got 18 other students here, and we're well and truly, the train has left the station. So yeah.
Thanks. And and certainly there's been a rapid increase in the number of students that have student access plans. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Peter, from your perspective?
Yeah, and also I was interested to hear James say before that you may not be aware if a student has a student access plan. Everybody in the teaching cycle should know. So if the course coordinator has been advised, and I'm not being critical here, James, then that information should have been passed on to a tutor. Now, a student access plan is available for students who have perhaps a disability or a medical condition or some other reason that they're not expected to work at the same level as everybody else in the same time frame. So as Karen said, we've got a lot more students who are arriving at university these days who are neurodivergent, or they might have ADHD, or they might be autistic. And we take their money, and our responsibility is to make sure that they get a fair and equitable education at the same time. And so the university has what's called student access plans set up, where students can receive accommodations. And those accommodations might be if a student doesn't feel comfortable or is unable to communicate in class, then they may not have to present an oral presentation to the class, but they're not excused from it. They might be expected to do it privately with a tutor at a different time. So it's important that our tutors know if students have accommodations so that A, they can support them, and B, so they don't ask them to do something that they shouldn't be doing in class because they don't want to be humiliated or expected to do something that they've already been excused from. Now, I think it's important everybody knows if a student's got a SAP, they are confidential, but the main thing you need to know is what the accommodations are. It may be that you find that out, but you don't find out what the medical condition is, and that's not a problem. So that's great if you find out. It should be passed on from every course coordinator to all the team. The other important role here is for you guys, there may be students that haven't wished to identify, or they may not be aware that there's accommodations available to them. So part of your role really is to get to know your students as well as you can. And it may be that you need to recommend to your course coordinator to suggest to the student that it's time they looked into the support that's available to them. Or if your course coordinator's perhaps got a really large class and you're the closest person, then it might be something that you could suggest to the whole class. And so that person might be able to pick up on it. But it is important. We've had instances where students have been excused from attending class on a consistent basis because of a problem they have, but then a tutor asks them where they've been or why have they come in late. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses for everybody, but it is important to recognise the individual circumstances of each of our students. And I'll just finish here, Karen. We know there's about 10 to 11% of students have already identified as having an issue such as disability or medical condition or some other reason that they can't do the work at the same pace as everybody else. But there's more than that out there that just haven't chosen to identify. So consider your class of 30, probably 3 to 5 people that fall into that category. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Peter.
Can I?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to. Yes,
Can I
Beatrice.
ask a quick question to Peter? Sorry, Peter. Well, thank you for sharing this student accommodation plan. I've never heard of this, but I did have experience of having a student coming to me seeking help because the student just got a big fight with the landlord. They didn't get along, but because she was in a long contract or something. So in this case, you mean that I should suggest her to report to UQ and get herself accommodation? Is this kind of thing available?
Different use of the word accommodation. In that instance, a person might go to student services, and student services can help students with accommodation and all those sort of things. When we talk about accommodation, in this instance, it's as an adjustment, and a student would go to a student advisor and set up a plan that makes adjustments to the program that everybody else is doing, but they do something a little bit differently.
Not a physical accommodation. Yeah. Sorry. Good.
Two different meanings.
Yeah.
I misunderstood that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. So we're coming to, like I promised I'd get you out, and we did talk about time management skills, but if you've got a little bit of time here, I just wanted to just wrap this up. Peter's going to pop just a little poll in the chat that you can just jump into and give us a little bit of feedback and add any questions that you would like to answer or like us to answer at different points in time. I'm just going to move that one over there. So last thing, and what I didn't actually say in the beginning, that both Alex and Jimmy, are both award-winning tutors. Okay, so they've been recognised across the university in the recent UQ Teaching Awards, and so they both know. But what having listened to them today, I feel like they both have like a philosophy. Like they've got a teaching philosophy, and I think in some ways becoming a good tutor means that recognising that you A, might need a teaching philosophy, and B, what it is. What is your reason for being? So, and I know, Jimmy, you talked about you treat your students as colleagues of training. Do you want to just spend 30 seconds or less talking about that, and then I'll go to you, Alex, as well.
Okay, sure. So essentially it's imagine if you're in a job and you had to train up a new colleague how to do everything. Think of the way you'd been answering their questions and that sort of thing and helping them along. That's actually how you treat the students. It's very much a business focused sort of thing. There's a lot of literature out there that says students aren't feeling prepared for the workforce. So you communicate to them like they're a colleague in the workplace, in a corporate environment. And, you know, you help them out the same way. You don't just lecture down to them. Yeah, we found that to be extremely effective.
Nice. Thanks, James. And Alex?
For me, my teaching philosophy is really around the student being really active. So like a student-centered or a learning-centered rather philosophy where they are actively building that knowledge themselves through with my help. So I'll ask them questions that I design in a specific way to get them to think, and then they're building that knowledge on their own. And that's termed social constructivism. For anyone who wants to look into the literature on that one.
Okay.
And Karen, if we can, Doreen's had a question up on Padlet for some time that she'd like us to address if we can.
Okay, can I might just close it off here, but Doreen, do you want to, well, the question is tips for handling students who may not have or English as an alternative language, and there may be a low-tech version. So if you want to stay and listen to Alex and Jimmy talk about that, feel free. But if not, thank you very much for coming and being with us this afternoon. We will post the slides to you, email the slides to you, and so there are a few hot tips in there. There's also a Padlet that has a bunch of links to different spaces, particularly, and I won't get you on, Hong, but the e-learning site is a veritable richness of support, and they also are available for consults. So if there's something that you don't know or don't know how to do, or you need some advice on something, then feel absolutely free to make an appointment to see those people. They are free and very available, but the Padlet will tell you where the links are to go to. So thanks very much. If you want to jump out now, that's fine. But Jimmy and Alex will just stay and talk with Doreen about the answer to that question, if you like.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Karen. Nice seeing you, Alex. We stay in touch.
See ya. Okay. Does anybody want to talk about the problem with people who, well, not the problem, just how we make the best possible experience for people who may be coming into the room with English as an alternative?
So for me, I've had experience with this just from my family. So I'm a first generation Australian from a bilingual household, and then been in a lot of situations where I don't know the language that everyone is using, or I don't know it to the same kind of level. And so I've been very conscious of how I use English in my context for where that may be the case for other people. And in the academic setting, like all the students have passed IELTS or some other kind of English language proficiency test to have gained entry to UQ, but that doesn't mean that they have the same kind of ability or confidence to be able to use academic English every day. But then I found it's about thinking about how you communicate with other people, and then being really aware of the words that you're using that may not be accessible to everybody. So is there slang that you use all the time? Are there references that are very culturally specific that may not be understood? Are they relevant to the context? Something that helps as well is if you have a class or a course that has a lot of technical language, then a glossary that explains what those specific words are within that context that students can refer to is helpful. When you being clear about the language that you're using. So be mindful of how you pronounce words, the speed that you speak, how you're articulating the words, and if there's a simple way to say something, then to go with that simple way. And by simple, I don't mean reducing the vocabulary down for it to be at like a lesser intellectual level. I mean simple as in, if you can use 6 words to get your concept across, then keep it to 6 words and 1 sentence instead of a really, really long sentence that has a lot of like add-ons to it. Yes, that's my advice. What do you think, Jimmy?
So just going on what Alex said there, so the concept she said at the end about keeping it linear and straightforward, that concept is called information fidelity. And that's something you may want to think about when you're communicating with your students. And yeah, to be entirely honest with you, this is something I struggle with quite a bit and get to hear about from time to time in feedback, because country of Queensland, we speak very quickly. We're probably the least understandable people in the whole country. You know, some folks in America doesn't even think it's English, so like legit. So yeah, we just got to be careful in that respect. In really extreme cases where they're very, very green, I just mentioned to Doreen in the chat there, you can direct that student to respond or provide questions on email as they're, you know, spooling up and getting their proficiency with English down pat, because then they can use translation software for some of the things that they don't mean. I mean, there's definitely times where I've been going around each of the tables and someone might be like, and they show you a word and they're like, teacher, what does that mean? And you're just like, oh, okay. And you do exactly what Alex said. You just really put it into simple words and content. So yeah, don't get frustrated with them. That's the worst thing you can do, even if it might trip up the class sometimes. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'd suggest too.
Yeah, it's a practice skill then. And I found that the more that I think about it, the more I use it in everyday speech and when talking and meeting with new people, or I'm going through like difficult concepts or things that I'm really familiar with, but they might not know. And Jimmy, you reminded me of another term, which is front-loading information to the beginning of a sentence. So you can take the most important information, put that at the very beginning of the sentence, so that that's what they're hearing and understanding first, before you have like the less important information afterwards. That's still relevant, but not the key point of what you're trying to communicate.
Thank you both. Is there anybody else that wants to unmute, jump in on camera, put your camera on, and if you've got any last questions, otherwise we'll finish off. Oh, Jenny, yes. Jenny, do you want to jump in? Where are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you. Yes, so my question earlier was about, so if I come into a classroom and none of the students have done the 100 pages of reading that they needed to do to be able to answer the questions that I have prepared for them, I mean, are you all suggesting that I just sit down with them and read? You know, I don't hear you telling me to spend the hour reading the actual text. I mean, is it a matter of, you know, letting them know that in the future they really have to do it? But what do I do in that moment when no one has done the homework? And so what do you do, basically?
I can jump in on that, and it involves being a little bit cheeky actually. So I've been involved here in the Queensland government with being on a few different role panels, and some of the stuff we do involves some of the techniques we teach to students, like focus group testing and qualitative research and whatnot. I can literally just turn around, I can pretty much just type on the board an actual honest to God interview question that a graduate was supposed to know, and said, if you're in for an interview right now, how would you answer that? If you'd done this week content, you would have known. Otherwise, you've just lost the role to someone from Griffith. That's how we do it.
That's a cheeky way to go about it. I have a different approach. And it goes back to what you were saying before, Jenny, about really setting expectations for students, but you can also balance it with the activities that you've designed for the class. So being really clear with students of what that pre-work is and why they're doing it, but making sure that it is something that they can achieve in the time before class. And if they, for whatever reason, haven't done that, is there space in your class to have an activity that they can participate in without having done that pre-work? Does that make sense?
I was going to say, if it's
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you. It's
yeah.
I'm moving from one school to another. It's the first time tutoring at a different school, and I'm just yeah, it's going to be a big learning curve for me. But thank you for this.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that the other thing, a bit kind of a combination between what Jimmy and Alex said, that tying the pre-reading so closely to the assessment outcomes. So not the activity you're doing, but that and every tutorial is probably designed to be should be part of, you know, their assessment exercise, you know, that whatever, building into whatever assessment they have to do. So by making sure that is so closely tied that they kind of that they feel like they're missing out, I suppose, is the other way. So they can get, you know, there might be a bit of FOMO because A, they don't know something. So B, that might mean that they might not pass their assessment. So I guess maybe that's kind of, those are the other ways. I've seen people do quizzes as they walk straight in the door. I mean, the English literature language teacher, Jude the Boyer, used to run a quiz and give, you know, like at the beginning of each session, based on, they were supposed to read whatever novel it was. So there's other ways of incentivizing it past just having, not past having a good tutorial, because we know that if they've done the reading, the tutorial is going to be 1,000 times better for them. But yeah, so that might be another thing that you can think of. Okay, well, I might say thanks very much to the end people, and thank you, Anthony, Doreen, Irene, and Jenny, and thank you to all our people, Jimmy, Alex, Peter, and Hung. If you have any more questions, you have my email, you have the e-learning advisor's email. Feel free to drop us an email, and we'll endeavour to answer your question. So have a great day and good luck in your tutoring for this year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Oh,
Nice job.
oh.
That was really good.